Greetings friends, and welcome to Tales from the Tabletop, the video series where I bring you anecdotes of adventure from Warhammer to D&D and everything in between. Let's begin. Our first story comes from the Highbrow Barbarian, who writes, "At our table, we had devolved into picking on our poor halfling player. The halfling player said to us, 'I'm sick of you guys disregarding us halflings, while you're over here trying to ask this crazy wizard conspiracy for help. I'm going to the Temple of Yandala.'" Yandala, the goddess matriarch of all halfling kind. Yeah, that'll help. Yeah, it's just a bunch of short people offering short prayers to a short statue. The whole table laughs, and our halfling player looks desperately to the GM for help. And the GM says, "Don't worry, they have short attention spans and they won't notice when you leave for your short errand." The halfling player sits as still as he can and vibrates until he can't hold the giggles in anymore. Our next story comes from Sensei, who writes, "My brother's character was trying to jump a 10-foot wide pit in a dungeon hallway. He took the end of a rope the party had just used and tied it around his waist and asked the party to hold the other end. In case he missed the jump, he figured the rope would break his 60-foot fall. Unsure of what might lie in the darkness beyond the pit, he turned to his fellows and said very gravely, 'If I scream, just run.' He then rushed down the passage and leapt and botched his strength roll, trying to make it across the pit. Just as he failed the roll, one of his comrades remembered that whatever they used the rope for previously, they'd tied it in 3 sections together. All the players looked at each other for a moment in silence as they realized my brother's player character was falling into a 60-foot pit with 150 feet of safety rope. My brother's character screamed as he plummeted, and, obediently, the other player characters turned and bolted. They were all the way down the hall before my brother even hit the bottom." Our next story is from Mid-Morning, who writes, "Playing Edge of the Empire, a Star Wars RPG. One of our players was playing as a Miralukan, a race who have no eyes and see through the Force. They can't see color, holograms, or anything that isn't physically there. They also have trouble with painted or written words and symbols. The Slicer says to the party, 'I've uploaded the building's blueprints,' and displays a hologram. 'As you can see, I've taken the liberty of displaying everyone on it with a tracker.' He hands a brooch to every player, 'and this should keep track of everyone.' The Miralukan says, 'Can you just, tell me what I have to do?' 'Everything's fine. It's on the display. You're the red blip right here. Your job is simple. Find what computer their security system is on and install this device onto it.' The Miralukan looks back and says, 'That's great and all, but you're forgetting one key element, that I am blind and don't know what red is.' The next story comes from Bread Crab, which I think is a take on the head crab from Half-Life, and I don't know, but now I want to draw a bread crab. Like that's on my list now. I have to draw that. Bread crab. In my favorite D&D game ever, a friend made a cleric based off of Friar Tuck. He was heavy, bald, and had a propensity for drinking too much. He also insisted that he be called Friar. In the town we were staying, the only place he could find lodging was at the inn of a retired gnome illusionist, who was endlessly amused by the friar and would prank him every morning with a brand new illusion. The friar would wake up and think he was in a rainforest, or the entire room would appear upside down. The gnome would make illusory demons appear in his chamber pot, so on. Every morning, the friar would ridiculously fall for every illusion. and then lovingly chastise the innkeep and go about his day preaching on the street. Taking this into account, one night we were at a tavern after an adventure, and we hatched a plan. The rogue got into a drinking contest with a friar and secretly told the GM that he was dumping his drinks. Many secret bluff checks later, the friar was passed out, dead to the world. At this point, we had the friar's player go out and get some more beer for us at the table. While the player was gone, the rest of us hatched a plan. When his character woke up the next morning, the friar was in his room at the inn. The room had been stripped totally bare, and he was lying naked on the floor, painted blue from head to toe. He groggily got up, looked around, and for the first time decided he wasn't going to fall for it. The friar left the inn in his blue birthday suit, waving a finger at the innkeeper and saying, not today, friend. The player was convinced that it was another illusion. The poor gnome innkeeper turned bright purple from trying to hold in his laughter. The friar proceeded outside, where he meandered hungover to his soapbox and began preaching. Eventually, after enough funny looks from the townspeople, he realized everything was real. And he ran naked through the streets to the lake to wash the paint off. From then on, every tavern we ever went to mysteriously sang the song of Friar Blueberry from Barrow Street. I will pay cash money out of my pocket for someone here to write and record that song. Does not need to be fancy pants, just a little something, a minute or longer. I will give $5 whole, which is a fortune to me. I will give $5 whole from my wallet for someone to write this song. Or I'll send you some free stickers, which is worth more than $5 whole. Either way. Our next story comes from Sleep Skull, and it's a horror story titled, I was asked to bring a knife to the game. I agreed to play a game in my city, Blades in the Dark, which I looked up. Blades in the Dark is a tabletop fantasy role-playing game by John Harper. It is set in the fictional city of Duskval, inspired by Victorian London and Gothic fiction. You can find copies of Blade in the Dark here, link in the description. I didn't know the game master. I didn't know anyone. When we were done discussing the game, I'm already getting ready to go, and then the game master says, "Oh yeah, and bring a knife with you to the game." I sit in bewilderment, asking, "A knife?" The game master responded, "No knife, no play." I'm sitting a little in shock. I bet you are, me too. I ask why the knife is needed, and the answer is, "It is my whim. For the surroundings." I honestly answer that I am a cowardly young girl and would prefer not to go to a game with strangers that would involve interacting with some kind of weapon. To which I receive the answer, "Don't worry, I understand the risks. You won't get hurt. Certainly not from a knife." That doesn't sound comforting to me. Is there anybody listening to this that would be comforted by that? Honestly, the only risk I'm willing to take while playing a game is a sugar coma from too many snacks. I didn't go. And I'm still honestly in shock. Are you? Are you really? I am too. Bring a knife? What in? First response. Oh, absolutely not. Best case scenario, they're a bunch of edgelords who want to use them as decoration or props, which means they don't have a proper respect for weapon safety, which in itself leads to dangerous accidents. Yup, right there. And on top of that, like, you won't get hurt, certainly not from a knife. What else might hurt me when I get there? OP, I am not a small girl. I'm a rather rotund fellow of average height, and I wouldn't go to that table, okay? Not a thing about you is cowardly. What you are, madam, is smart. Public service announcement. If you're discussing playing a role-playing game with strangers and they say, hey, be sure to bring a knife to this room full of strangers who will also have knives, declining the invitation is not cowardly, it's smart. I will repeat. Walking away from a room full of knives is not cowardly, it's just smart. Good on you, OP. I hope you're doing well wherever you are. Our next story comes from Gimmelot's Iron Forger. We were playing 1st edition AD&D with a truly gifted and sadistic dungeon master, whose favorite NPC villain was a lich who went by the name Umric. Umric's backstory was that he was an occult follower of a powerfully evil lord, and somehow he managed to survive thousands of years into our AD&D world. Umric would thrash us at every turn. Our group went on multiple quests to get weapons to fight him and his hordes. My main character was a dwarven fighter who quested to recover the axe of the dwarven lords, and he achieved his quest. On this day, my dwarf was swinging his axe to great effect against the lich with the help of several human and elven characters, along with a brother dwarf armed with a hammer of thunderbolts. Long story short, we were doing quite well against Umric, and after the 3rd critical hit from my axe, he cast off a wish spell and said, I wish you could not attack me with your damned axe. The table went silent. I turned to my brother dwarf with his hammer of thunderbolts and said one word. Trade? The table exploded into laughter, and we went on to win the day with extreme prejudice. Our last story comes from someone named I Do Science Not Finance. Cool name. In a dungeon, we found a magical device that produced unlimited amounts of holy water. Some distance away was a sarcophagus with something resting inside of it. We properly drew the conclusion that it was either a vampire or a mummy. And being a low-level characters that we were, we wanted to kill the thing at minimal risk to ourselves. We coordinated our efforts to shift the stone lid slightly to create a crack through which we could pour the holy water. I used the Mount spell to place a magical horse on top of the lid to trap anything trying to get out, and we set up a bucket brigade that ran back and forth, collecting holy water and dumping it into the sarcophagus. The fight that ensued took a long time, and the creature within was not happy about the situation. Whatever it was, it got more and more angry as it kept failing strength check after strength check to lift the lid, thanks to the 1,800-pound Clydesdale standing on top of it. The longer it went on, the deeper our conviction became that this unholy creature was truly too powerful for us to stand toe-to-toe with, and we were doing the right thing. How else could it possibly survive the onslaught of so much holy water for so long? What ungodly number of hit points could this creature possibly possess? At the end of this very long process, we learned 2 things. 1, forest trolls have high constitutions, and 2, can save against drowning remarkably well. And that's the end for this one. Today's artwork, as you might could tell, is unrelated to the story. It is an illustration of a character class from my own role-playing game called Battle Jacket, and this character class is called a Technomancer. Imagine, if you will, a time similar to what we live in today is actually the ancient past. There's been some apocalyptic event about 1,000 years ago, but now there's magic in the world, and old artifacts from the before time, things that you and I would know to be video game consoles, are now enchanted magical items that can be explored and utilized to great effect, and to to great calamity. A technology nerd walking around in a medieval sword and sorcery environment, and there's your technomancer. If this sounds interesting to you and you'd like to know more, please, oh please, go and read the production blog on my website about the making of the battle jacket. It's at coffeeandhate.biz. Click blog at the top. And for extra points, hey, if you've got a story in which you're about to play a game, but one of your fellow players maybe let something slip, or you learned something about the party that made you nope out of there real fast, it doesn't necessarily have to be knives at the table, but anything you find amusing, please share it with us in the comments below. I would love to read it. Until next time, thanks so much for watching, thank you for listening, and may your dice roll high and never be cursed. One of our players was playing as a Miraluken. Son of a beast. I need to look these up before I start these.